today was the last day of your life, how exactly would you be prepared for eternity?
Well, that is a bizarre question.
Not really. At some point, your life here will end.
I don't mind you telling your child about God, but what I've seen around here, what I know is that God is indifferent.
Turn back before it's too late.
You want me to believe? Then show me something. Show me a miracle.
Daughter, I say to you, get up. I've come here to help you put back together the broken pieces of your life. Who are you? Who do you say I am?
With all the odds set against him, this one solitary man is committed to freeing himself and vanquishing evil, even the evil within himself. There is a wonderful scene between Edmund and a fellow prisoner, a priest, played by the great Richard Harris. In the pit of self-pity, in a moment of real despair, while the priest is on the ground dying, he turns to Edmond and says, "Your final lesson, do not commit the crime you now serve the sentence for. Remember, God saith, vengeance is mine." And I look down to him and say, "But I don't believe in God." He says to me, "It does not matter, Edmond. He believes in you." And he does. God loves each one of us personally, and he is there for us, even in our darkest moments of despair. After shooting Monte Cristo, I inexplicably get a call from Mel Gibson. My agent didn't call, my manager didn't call. I didn't know Mel Gibson. I wasn't politicking for the role because nobody knew it was happening. Mel Gibson wants me to play Jesus Christ. He wants the guy with the initials of JC, who just happens to be 33 years of age, to play Jesus Christ. Is that a coincidence? I don't think so. Is your life a coincidence? Or is it all just a chance? Some of you may be miserable right now, confused, uncertain of the future, hurting. This is not the time to back off or to give in. When I was up there on the cross, I learned that in his suffering was our redemption. Remember, the servant is no greater than the master. Each of us must carry our own cross.
For me, I think evil is something that when it comes to you, it's not necessarily going to come with a sign saying I'm evil. It usually will come in an enticing form.
And you said at one point that a big dark force didn't want us to make this film.
Sure.
What was the force?
What was the force? It's the thing you can't see. See, I'm a believer, by the way. So if you believe that there are big realms of good and evil, and they're slugging it out.
What does the evil side want?
Oh, it wants you. It wants you. People are capable of horrors, of atrocities. We're also capable of wonderful things, of good things. And we have the choice. What do we choose, you know?
There's something real about Mel Gibson and Jim Caviezel. They don't seem to have this fake religious facade that you see with some religious leaders, with some people that you may meet in church. They seemingly have a realness to their faith, something that is tangible that you can experience when watching one of their movies, such as The Passion of the Christ. Now, Jim Caviezel in this video is discussing his latest movie that's coming out March 23rd, Paul, the Apostle of Christ, where Jim Caviezel plays Luke from the Gospel of Luke, and James Faulkner plays Paul. And it looks intriguing. We also have a movie coming out from Mel Gibson, the sequel to The Passion of Christ, and Jim Caviezel playing Jesus Christ once again.
Is the world full of conspiracies to you?
See, it's gotten bad name, conspiracy. It's only logical to assume that conspiracies are everywhere because that's what people do. They conspire. If you can't get the message, get the man. So I think that's what we're engaged in here. We're engaged in character assassination.
Do you think some of the, and there have been those, perhaps quietly at this point, who say, you know, Mel Gibson's totally crazy to do a project like this. What's he doing?
Yeah.
Do you think that's religiously motivated? Is there a bit of religious bigotry in there? Is there a bit of suspicion for what you believe?
I don't know.
And there a discomfort with your acting on that belief, or at least allowing that belief to shape what you're involved in here?
I think from a totally sort of earthbound point of view, it's just bad business decision. It's like, well, there's a lot of dough to throw at that. It's not even in the language we understand, and it's going to like repel a lot of people. What's the deal? But it's like childbirth. I mean, it's either got to whelp itself out, or I just got to do it. It's one of those things, and chips fall where they may, you know.
There is a price for our faith, for our freedoms. I have been literally scourged, hit by the whips, crucified, struck by lightning. Yes, open heart surgery. That's what happens after 5.5 months of hypothermia.
It's amazing some of the things that happened to him while he was playing Jesus in that movie. He was even struck with lightning, and he had his arm dislocated as Christ did.
One day, during the shoot, my arm was wedged under that heavy beam when someone yanked it in the other direction. My muscles wrenched, and my shoulder separated. I fell to the ground, dropped my head into the sand. This take now remains in the movie. In the later part of the film, Jesus experiences a shoulder separation. Well, I now know what that felt like. Every day I had to pick up that thing. It was like a penance. It ripped into my shoulder, tearing at my flesh. And with each passing hour, it got heavier. But had this been shot in a studio, you never would have seen that performance. The suffering made my performance, just as it makes our lives. Some of us now, and you know them, embrace a fake Christianity, where it's all happy talk. I call it happy Jesus and glory. Guys, there was a lot of pain and suffering before the resurrection. Your path will be no different. So embrace your cross and race toward your goal. I want you to go out into this pagan world. I want you to have the courage to step into this pagan world and shamelessly express your faith in public. The world needs proud warriors animated by their faith. Warriors like St. Paul and St. Luke, who risked their names, their reputations, to take their faith, their love for Jesus into the world. God is calling each one of us, each one of you, to do great things, but how often we fail to respond, dismissing it as some mental blurb. It is time for our generation now to accept that call the call of God urging all of us to give ourselves entirely to Him.
With the way society has been of recent, I think we're well due for a movie like this to be in the public eye, perhaps to get people to look upon the life of Christ and maybe see Him as a standard to where they can learn something from Him, because it seems like we're sliding into chaos. Our society has become almost unrecognizable within the last decade, and things are being discussed that 10 years ago would have shocked anyone, would have appalled anyone. We also have technology that seemingly is not slowing down and is being implemented as fast as possible. Some of these technologies are bordering on immoral, with topics like cloning or surveillance, or even potentially modifying the human by putting microchips or even implants in their body, growing body parts in animals to be used later for a person. There's just a lot of strange stuff going on recent. Of course, this technology keeps expanding and going into this strange realm we've never went before. And the question is anybody asking, what will this do to society? What will this do to humanity? This is why I think movies like The Passion are a good anchor for us to look back at and to see where our society is at. It seems that some people in our society have no respect for what caused the West to rise and how we got to where we are today. They're willing to spurn the foundation of our society. And that foundation of the West is built on Christianity. Now they're questioning everything, even their gender. They're questioning the family structure. They're questioning even humanity itself with new technology rising, where we have things like cloning to make the perfect human, or even potentially modifying the human body and other things. So we have a society that's spurning its foundation. And of course, when you lose your foundation, the society itself will crumble. And this is where we're at. I think a lot of people do not see this. This is why we need to retain our foundation and to bring back the truth we find in Scripture. Even simplistic things like the family unit are even in jeopardy these days. It's quite shocking to see where we're at, to see just how far our society has fallen. Check this out. In reality, this is not fake news. This actually occurred. There was a survey from Facebook where they asked this. Now here we actually have an article on it. Facebook has admitted it was a mistake to... You can see it down here at the bottom. Yes, this is something that seemingly keeps coming up. Things like alternative media or conservative ideas are considered evil and heinous. Our society has lost its mind. It's sick. It has a cancer. It has a cancer called sin. And this just is one hallmark of how, for a person like me, it's so obvious. This is disgusting. This is how far we have fallen as a society. So, this is why we need movies like The Passion of the Christ or Paul the Apostle of Christ. All these people who want to besmirch these type of movies are the ones that seemingly are not understanding where our society is at and how far it has fallen. We are really in a shockingly low place right now. And we need the blood of Christ to bring us back to the truth.
He was perfect. I mean, he came tailor-made to do this. he was able to put aside any of his personal kind of wants and just be, which is all it was required, really. It just be in this situation. And it was, I don't know, he pulled it off. I mean, that's one of the hardest things to do. And I defy anybody else to try that. There's another aspect of him that's just otherworldly or inspired or higher. Sometimes you'd forget about everything and just get zoned right in onto what he was doing. It'd be really interesting. And it wouldn't be necessarily the way you visualized it, but you'd get something else, but it wasn't bad. It was like, wow, I never thought of that, you know. And, you know, you talk with him about it between takes, and then he'd go and do it again. He wasn't trying anything. It just happened, you know. And that effortlessness and ease with which he just let that happen was, I think, boy, you don't often see that. There's not a performance like it. We got this guy, Tony Bertorelli, on the set one day, and he came in late in the picture because he replaced another actor who had to leave. And he was just walking down to the set, smoking a cigarette in his Pharisee outfit, you know, a cup of coffee, cigarette. He's walking down to the set, and he bumped into Jim in the parking lot in his full getup, and it stopped him. And he had dropped his coffee and everything, and he was just stunned into a complete, like, stupefied state. You don't know that they're special effects. That's how good they are. You don't know.
Jim is not just Jim Caviezel in this movie. There's no one thing that has Jim just being him. He either has a wig, he always has a nose prosthetic on that we apply every single day. I had a total of 9 different stages to Jim Caviezel's makeup, from start to finish, from Last Supper to Pieta. We had to have a technique that the actor could be mobile in, could work in, and most importantly, a makeup application that we could do in a timely fashion. If we have an actor in facial prosthetics, full body prosthetics covering every inch of his flesh, a beard, a wig, dentures, you start to add up all these elements and you start to add up time. And when you're doing that 25 days in a row, you can't have 8 and 10 hour makeups. You'll never sleep.
So we go into this meeting, and I'm about 40 minutes in, and Mel Gibson shows up, and he starts talking about different things, and I suddenly have this shot back to when I was 19 years old. At this point, I said, wait, this isn't a surfing film. My heart started burning. And I said, you want me to play Jesus, don't you? And he looked at me, he was smoking a cigarette, and he goes, yeah. I looked down, and I said, okay.
In person, very shy, always looking down, and he smokes nonstop. And but for 15 years, as I got to know him, that he had 15 years that he felt in his heart that God was calling him to make this movie. And he knew what would happen if he did this movie.
And we had to show that. We had to make it sympathetic. I think one of the biggest struggles was trying to make this makeup as real as possible, and at the same time make sure that there was still a human element, something that the audience could connect to.
As much as we knew about the makeup effects techniques that create realistic skin qualities, it still wasn't enough. I approached Steve McAvity and said, what if we take visual effects and combine the two?
You know, you'd put the lesions or the scarification on, and it would be pretty livid. And, you know, the guy wouldn't actually have a flagellum sort of ripping the guy's flesh off or anything. He would just kind of fake it. And we'd have to cover up the wound with computer-generated skin. And then as the flagellum would come through, you'd actually reveal the wound that was already on him. So it was kind of like the reverse of what most people would have done.
So 2 days later, I never forget it, I was in my kitchen, I was taking the garbage out, and the phone rings, and I said, hey, hello. And it says, hey, Jim, it's Mel. I said, Mel who? He says, I don't know, Mel Brooks. Hey. So do you still want to play this Jesus guy? And I said, yes. And he says, if you do it, you may never work in this town again. And I got quiet, and I felt fear come into me. That's one thing about our faith. When you feel that, that's not Jesus. Then he put his hand over the phone. There was a long pause, and I could hear him muffling through the phone. I could hear him say, he's not going to do it.
That's how it is. You make a commitment to Christ that you're going to do that, and then the devil comes in and sifts you out. And all of a sudden, I shouldn't have had this meeting. I shouldn't have done this. I've done all these things, and people will find out eventually that this is the kind of person I am, and I can't do this movie. I'm the wrong guy. I shouldn't direct this. And so he called me. He says, if you do this movie, you may never work in this town again. I don't want to be responsible for that. And I felt the fear because I thought of all the nice things that I have, and I realized that God had got me into this business, that my talent came from God, not from man. And so I said, look, man, we're all called to carry our own cross. If you don't pick up and carry your cross, you will be crushed by the weight of it.
And he got silent. And then I said, oh my God. He said, what? I said, I just realized my initials are JC and I'm 33 years old. He says, God, you're freaking me out. And he hung up the phone. But that's what happened. I mean, it really happened. And we go on to film, and it was this long, coming to conversion that I was going to have to suffer.
He doesn't talk a lot, Mel. He moves a lot. It's like if he want to tell you how to do things more with his body, the way how he moves, than the way how he talks. There is this thing that's almost animal about him, and instinctive, which is very interesting.
When he's directing and he's watching the video monitor, and he'll be doing the action. He'll be even saying the lines sometimes, and the facial expressions, and he'll move it back and forth. And you almost want to sit him down and tie him to the chair because it gets distracting. He's moving and he's making noise while he's doing it too. So sound guys are going crazy, and he really gets sucked right into the moment, as if he's part of that whole scene that he's directing.
Going about doing this movie was, thinking that if we had done this thing in a controlled set, you would have never saw the performance. It was truly birthed in pain. Oh. And it immediately threw me on my face. So right from the get-go, I had my shoulders separated. At that point, I'm thinking, God, hey, hello, we're trying to do a movie here. I'm an actor.
Right.
Just an actor here. You're letting, the devil or whatever to destroy us. Yeah. At the same time, we're getting phone calls and stuff from major publications saying expressed interest that Mel Gibson is anti-Semitic. Again, I was scourged, accidentally hit with during the carrying of the cross. My shoulder was dislocated. Up on the cross, I had, I weighed 210 pounds. In the filming, I was about 168. I was so sick, I kept throwing up. I had both lungs filled with fluid, pneumonia. After the movie was over, many people don't know, and I don't talk about it too much, but I have to have heart surgery. Wow. So I was struck by lightning on the last shot of the day. So
that's kind of a moving encounter right there.
So what I'm telling you,
Wow.
If you want to be a Christian, you're in for it. We didn't really rehearse this. We had a metal plank about a foot away from my back, right here, and I'm standing right here, and they would hit the metal plank, and then there's 1, 2, 3 cameras on this particular day, and Mel in the middle of the shoot, because these guys don't speak English and we don't speak Italian, so there's a translation problem. So he's telling Caridi, his assistant, to translate to them, to tell him to hit Jim like baseball, like a pitcher in a baseball game. And they're like, what? They don't play baseball. And he's like, cricket. So they went back here and took a run like this. And I'm sitting here like that, and they hit the metal plank, except with that momentum, the whip went over, and 14-inch gash on my back. And I went right down, like in a football game, where you get the wind knocked out of you.
Yeah, you feel a little bit too far away right now.
Too far? How's that?
Yeah, that I believe.
Is that good? You can control it pretty good. I'm not really giving it too hard, like when I'm selling it. And the beards that they played, they didn't look like phony Bible bad wigs and all this kind of stuff. Either people had their real hair, or they had very good wigs and beards, and they were applied by people that really knew what they were doing. I think Jim had his beard applied in pieces and layers, like with hair. That's kind of like doing a haircut in reverse. That's almost impossible. That's like shoving a toothpaste back in a tube, you know? And it looked real. I was lucky to have Steve McAveety there, who was like, the guy's amazing. He doesn't know how to quit, you know? Sometimes I want to slap him. I said, why don't you just quit? You know, but he doesn't know how to quit. He's really dogged. So he was really good to have there. He's always a good guy. And a lateral thinker as well. If you're banging your head up against a wall, he'll say, hey, why don't you just walk around the wall? And you go, oh, no, thanks, Steve. I hadn't thought of that, you know. I mean, he just thinks in an oblique way that's kind of, it just didn't occur to you because you're too focused on what you're doing. So he's able to sort of like pull you up and go, hey, you know. Great. He was a really valuable asset, really put himself out there, gave everything he had. The guy lost 50 pounds during production. He was like a walking skeleton by the end of it, but he was like a ball of energy. He was just going on hard.
I got an idea. Why don't we let me out now?
Nobody understands me. I need a translator. Oh, you were.
Di non andare indietro, Jim, se no se...
Molto energy. Now we have these signs. Do you see these signs?
Vedete questi cartelli che abbiamo qua giù, che abbiamo fatto?
All right. Okay, do that one.
Fate questo, va demonio, va demonio!
I mean, you're working in another country with people who speak another language, and you have that step. You're missing that step of communication, instant communication. You got to depend on interpreters and stuff like that. So it's kind of frustrating. Everything takes a little longer.
Don't use the same gestures all the
E
time.
non fate lo stesso gesto così continuo.
No repetitive gestures. Use different gestures.
Fate gesti diversi.
And then sometimes it was not worthwhile trying to even explain what you really meant. You had to do something simpler that would approximate that. Some things are too intangible almost to grasp. So you just say, okay, everybody, think happy thoughts, or, you know, whatever it is that you can juxtapose against something else to emotionally get the right kind of level.
You're all looking here.
State tutti guardando verso di qua.
34, 35, 36, 37, 38.
I think it was more my problem than anything else. I mean, people on the continent over there are used to somebody next to them speaking another language, so they develop some kind of other sense that understands. And in many cases, I would be saying something in English, and they would just look at the translator and go, no, I get it. And not knowing English, but they get it.
The whole point of this thing is I wanted people not to see me. I wanted them to see Christ. While we were shooting the scene, one of our first scenes with Pilate, when we were alone in a room, he asked me, are you a king? And I felt as if, even though I'm looking through my own eyes, it's like something came through me, and I stepped back and said, okay. And we had already done this, maybe we shot this five different times. Something happened in that moment. It just said, this is the king who's speaking right now. And I just sat back and watched, and it was like I went on autopilot. And Mel said, whatever you just did, I want you to keep doing it. While I was on the cross, I was freezing all the time, hyperthermia. The makeup hours were from 2 in the morning till 10, and then 2 hours of touch-ups during the day. You're always cold.
Oh, he suffered up there. He really suffered. I mean, to begin with, the poor guy had to get up at 2 a.m. and then start getting like airplane glue put all over his body, and then they had to glue prosthetic pieces all over him. And it was a very long, arduous process, and he had to exercise great patience. And he was fatigued. I mean, he woke up at 2 a.m. and then he was working all day. It was freezing out there.
It was complete prayer. It forced me into going into deep prayer with God, praying from the heart. And if I would not have been able to do it without that.
What could be the most painful thing? To lose your child, to see your son, your child suffering like Mary's child does.
I said, don't explain it to me, just show me. You're a brilliant actor, show me. And he goes, well, it's like this. Got it. I know exactly what he wants.
I've learned a long time ago never to doubt Mel Gibson and the ability of the man. Whether it's Braveheart, whether it's The Passion, whether it's What Women Want, I know the guy will pull it off.
What I thought was going to be the biggest challenge in this film for the actors and for the film was to speak this dead language that nobody spoke. These two dead languages, I thought that was just going to kill us.
What's fascinating about it is when you watch the movie, about 10 minutes in, you forget about the languages. You're more concerned about the visual. I mean, the visual brings you in.
So the concept of the movie, to me, is going to be like a silent movie some way, because the audience, they're going to understand what's going on from images, not from words.
This film shows the reality of sin, shows what he went through for us, how much he loves us.
And this movie is not going to be so easy to watch, because I think when you come out from this movie, you're going to think about it.
I don't know if this will ever happen again, to make a film like this, just because of what this content is. This film, I believe, is going to bring Christians and non-believers to a closer relationship with God.
He told me that he went through a rough time in his life about 12 years ago, and he reached a point where he'd gotten away from his faith, and he started looking at the Gospels, and he started meditating on the passion and death of Christ, and he said the wounds of Christ began to heal his own wounds. That's what he told me. But it forced me into a place that was much deeper than my head, which was my heart, and that's where I needed to go in order to get to that place in order for people to have any sort of reaction. This film pushes and demands people to honestly say, is this really what went on? Is this really in the Gospels? There are many articles now saying, nah, it didn't happen. Oh, that line in the Bible, it's not authentic. But if it's not authentic, then what do we have? What faith do we have in Christianity?
And the film was fantastic also. Also.
It was very controversial, that film, as you know.
Yeah.
He was a very controversial character.
But do you think that the controversy was that it was anti-Semitic? Do you agree with that or not?
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, he himself was the greatest Jew there ever was.
Well, the portrayal of the other Jews in the film was a little bit hard, I thought.
You know, we stayed with the gospel, and it didn't. It is offensive, but it's offensive to all sorts of people, and also very promising for many people as well. I tried to focus on the parts where he says, you know, my commandment to you is you love your neighbor.
Oh yeah, the character of Jesus was wonderful. That I don't have an issue with. It was the rest of them, and Pontius Pilate was too nice, I thought.
Yeah, well, it was, you know.
I never thought of him as nice.
They didn't make him as evil as he actually was in the Gospels.
I ever thought of him as nice. But either way.
I walked in, and first thing he said was, "How are you? Come here." And I walked over, and he says, "Jim Caviezel, what? How you learn to blame Jesus Christ?" I said, "Well, Holy Father, you know, Jesus was well, I like the Italian people, you know." And he says, "Yes." And I said, and they're very beautiful people. "Yes." And I said, "I think Jesus was Italian." He says, "What?" And I said, "Well, hold on. He didn't leave home until he was 30. He always hung out with the same 12 guys. And his mother believed he was God." then he says, I said, "You're not upset with me?" He says, "No, I always believed he was Polish."
She knew where Maya Morgenstern was. I'd never heard of her. She said, you know, there's a woman in Romania who may have, and then she showed me another film she was in, and the film started off with a close-up of her, a big close-up, and I thought, that's her, get her down here immediately, and she was indeed perfect. I mean, I wanted her to experience the suffering herself with a certain sense of acceptance, you know, to be grief-stricken, but not to let it overwhelm her dignity. I didn't want her breaking down and like bawling and screaming and stuff, because most people would do that. I wanted her to have almost a mystical connection or understanding with what was going on, with that knowledge, so that she could actually bear it, although it was unbearable. To get someone to do that convincingly, you needed an actress who was very soulful, and of course Maya is an extremely soulful person, and extremely sweet and kind, and you know, and capable of doing wondrous things. And it wasn't much, but it was enough. You know, whatever she was doing was amazing. And she was with child at the time. She didn't tell us that, so she had this other kind of glow going on. I didn't figure that out till like about halfway through the shoot. I saw her waddling up to the set, and I said, "Hey," and she went, "I'm busted, right?" Yeah, I said, "Yeah." So.
Do they call Francisco's? Do they call him Frank here?
No, they call him
Ciccio,
yes, nickname, because I come from south of Italy, and when in south of Italy, Francesco is Ciccio or Chico.
When Francesco De Vito came in the room, you know, he played Peter. I mean, it was instant. The guy was just perfect. He had sort of childlike innocence, and he looked kind of rough and busted up, and you know, it was just perfect. So you knew instantly, you know. He didn't even have to talk. I got excited. You know.
How do you prepare?
Yeah.
To play the Son of God?
It's a great question. How do you prepare?
Yeah.
After day in and day out of this, plus the hyperthermia, plus the, you know, I had a separated shoulder and whatnot, it forced me to pray. I had to go to a place of something very deep, because I was really going crazy.
You said you went into prayer. Is that something that you believe anyway prior to the part? You are a believer?
Mm-hmm. Well, there's no question that I believed, and I think many of your viewers know what I'm talking about, that why would you subject yourself to persecution unless you know that's the truth? I may be playing Christ, but a lot of times I felt like Satan, because I had obscenities wanting to come out of me, and it was so cold. It was like knives coming through you. Hyperthermia. I don't know if you've ever dealt with that.
No.
One day of hyperthermia, you're so cold I couldn't barely get the lines out. My mouth was shaking uncontrollably. My arms and legs went numb. I was suffocating on that cross. So, and in the meantime, you watch people have coffee and you know, laugh. You know, they were very indifferent about what you're going through.
Was that true across the board with the cast or with the crew or anything?
No, we had very sympathetic people. We had people like in all humanity. We had sympathetic people and indifferent people, and people that were that it repelled them. And watching that at times, you know, when you're watching that, I would want to, you know, burst out in my own humanity, you know, tell this guy to shut up or, you know, take off.
Which was the very opposite of what Jesus did in forgiving his enemies.
So then at that point, then what do you do if part of my, well, what I'm a craftsman at is being an actor. Where does this place? Mm-hmm. Where does he go? So I had to seriously get into a prayer. When the film ended, the last time I felt that way was Schindler's List and Private Ryan. I didn't know what to say. And when the film was over, it's not really something you can just talk about. It has to live with you for a while. And then I think it's going to be that way with most people that walk out of the theater. You said something very critical there. People turn their eyes away when they see it, and what they're seeing is their own sin. And it is not wanting to deal at times with their own sin. It is that hard. to look at. But this film forces you to see yourself not the way you want to see yourself, but the way God sees you. There's no passive onlookers here.
No. What part of this had the greatest effect on you? Is that possible to isolate a moment or a time or not?
Oh, boy. I'll be honest with you. There are things that I went through I can't even talk about.
I'm sure.
I felt like a great presence came within me at times when we were filming, and this prayer that came from me was, I don't want people to see me, I just want them to see Jesus, and through that conversions will happen. And that's what I wanted more than anything, that people would have a visceral effect to finally make a decision whether to follow him or not.
And that's the only choice. I mean, it's either you do or you don't. You're for me or you're against me.
Yeah. So throughout this, when people put on Christ, when they go outside, it's all non-believers see. And you're going to have people that reject it. And for the most part is that. But there are others that have made a living at being Christian. And this is serious, because they know the body of Christ. They know what that is. And for them it's even more serious. And more or less many of the people, many of our Jewish brothers are terrified. And I hear people coming up to me all the time asking me, Jim, they're Jewish, and they say, some of the emails, have you read these things? This is frightening. I didn't kill Christ. And I said, no. The people standing before Christ and Pilate during the judgment scene does not condemn an entire race for the death of Christ, any more than the actions of Mussolini condemn all Italians, or the heinous crimes of Stalin condemn all Russians. We're all culpable in the death of Christ. My sins, your sins, put him on that cross. And I bring this up because it's very important to address, because I want my Jewish brothers to see this film. I want people in my own faith that think it's anti-Semitic to see this film. And I want non-religious people to see this film. This film does not play the blame game at all. We're all culpable in the death of Christ.
You went up to him, didn't you?
As far as just directing the film, it's probably about the hardest gig I've ever done in my life. And it wasn't as big as Braveheart with all the horses and people and stuff, but there were more precise things that had to happen in it. Every sequence was definitely difficult to get, and difficult to get the way you wanted to get it, so that you really experienced it, so you felt like you were in the middle of it.
The actors and everybody on the film was being motivated to put everything that they had, and their best work on the screen.
He's wonderful with the actors. The greatest experience was to get to see him working with the actors, because he's so good at drawing out of them, because being an actor himself, he was really great at knowing how to deal with them to get what he needed in terms of a performance.
But stand up first, like a rat in a gun shot. You ever seen that?
They trust him. I think it's about trust. A lot of actors resist directors because they're probably better actors than the directors are. In Mel's case, he's at least on par with any of them, I dare say.
Mr. Gibson knows exactly what he wants, but in the same time he's an actor, and a wonderful actor, and he loves and he respects actors. He asked us, he pushed us to express ourselves, to be creative.
In choosing this role, I already made a decision. How it changed me, it was from the beginning of doing the movie. I knew that this is the way it's always going to be. So that's, and Mel actually said that to me when I took the film. He says, he says, you may never work again, but I could go down in the ship. If this is the one that takes me out, that's fine with me. I'd like to work again, but I'd never been a guy who who would sell his soul to get, money or fame. Was never my goal. It was to serve my faith, my God.
What is your dream role if you could pick it? Do you have one?
No, I have no idea at this point to determine where I'm going to go with this career. I believe he's going to pick them where he wants me. So let me just say that there are roles that The Scarlet and the Black is a film that I own, that I would like to get made. It's a film that clearly shows good and evil, shows the good intentions of even men that claim to be good. The bad guy roles that I've read, many times they're bad because, they weren't to be evil.
Cartoon evil, yeah.
But people that are doing evil don't believe they're doing evil. Between takes, as I'm here, they would take me down, and every time my shoulder was locked in, there was a 1,000-foot cliff, and it would hit the cross and would snap my shoulder out of joint, and I was just beyond. And at that point, I was so sick that it would be ripped out, and I honestly, I could barely feel it anyway. I was so gone, but something was wrong with my heart. And the man put a stethoscope on my heart, and he said, "Mel, he can die." And at that point, Mel, some of the greatest things about Mel Gibson was that he was a gambling man. And he said, "Jim, what do you think?" And I said, I'm going... Between me and God, this is between me and God, because I never thought I was good enough.
Wow.
And at that moment, it was, I'm ready to go home. So you can take me here, there's no problem. But I knew if I died making this movie, I knew that so many people would be saved.
Yeah.
At the end of the movie, I was walking up the mountainside. As I got up about halfway, everybody's in location, about 250 people. About halfway up, I felt this presence come over me, an evil presence, and it was, "You're a dead man." And I remember thinking, this is the best news. This is where I was. This is the best news I've ever had, because I know if I die, I'm going to heaven.
Yeah.
I got to the top. About the fifth take, the clouds were so low, the thunder and lightning was the sound of a howitzer. It was so powerful that you could feel the earth move.
Yeah.
And I saw two people that were about as close as these two are to me, and their eyes were looking up and they were watering like they were going to cry. And my hair, I couldn't feel it, and I heard a huge gasp in the audience because they saw something. And I couldn't hear anything. It was like an eye of a storm. If you're in the eye of the storm, your hair could be blowing. It could be 30-knot winds, and I'd never heard the wind blowing. It was silence. 5 seconds, 4, 3, 2, 1, and this light came right down from heaven and lit me up. What people witnessed was an illumination around my body and a fire on the right and left side of my head. And for one moment, I was looking at myself outside my body.
You got struck with lightning.
I was struck by lightning.
Yeah.
And there were three groups of people. Pastor Miles mentioned that asked me this yesterday. Was it true? There were a lot of people that were very indifferent about being extras in the movie. I said, yes, tremendous amount. In fact, there were three groups of people, and there were the believers, and there were the non-believers, and there were the fence riders. They're the ones that are very indifferent about it. Mm-hmm. Two of those are bad decisions. But what was amazing is that people who think they're fence riding think that that's not a choice. It is a choice. Mm-hmm. You are fence riding, and that is a decision that one is making. Mm-hmm. And but when I was hit, everybody fell on their face. Amazing. The ground shook. Yeah. And from that point, that was the last shot of the movie.
Big part of this story, as it was between Frank and I, and how he saw the world. Being a Christian is not easy. In fact, it's a hard path to follow, but he certainly showed me that it's not weakness, it's not passivity, it's being able to look evil straight in the face with love. And you know, things weren't going right in the business, and oftentimes they're not. But I would complain, you know, shortly after the Passion, I couldn't get a job, you know, and you can fall into this place of victim, you know, that it isn't fair.
What role did prayer and your personal faith have in helping you shape this role? Only the second biblical role you've ever done. And was there any hesitation, given how much of your career has been overshadowed by the Passion and your playing of Jesus?
I'll tell you something interesting. Dennis Quaid, when we did Frequency together, he just says, okay, kid, come here. He's really funny. He said, I'm going to give you I know you didn't ask for it, but I'm going to give you some advice as an actor. Never play Superman and never play Jesus. I'll never forget it.
Well, you violated one of the two, maybe Superman's in it.
I did, but I ran into him again at the Cannes Film Festival when The Passion came out. And he says, he saw it, and he just said, listen, that was extraordinary. And, you know, you will always be able to say you did something in this business. You'll always be able to hang your hat on that. And he said he was proud. And so you have to pick the right one, you know? It just opens up. And I don't know how you turn down Mel Gibson. I mean, the movie he did prior to that was Braveheart, and that wasn't too bad of a film.
Yeah, I noticed that.
You know, so I would work with that guy any day. He's extraordinary. He's the greatest.
You know, there's, I guess, my whole quest to becoming a actor. I did it because not to be famous. I felt that there was a quality, something in me that needed to be heard, that I could be a voice for others. To do what people like Costner or Cooper or Stewart, you know, a lot of these guys that just, Clint Eastwood, that they did to me as a kid, Stallone, Rocky.
These are all heroic figures, by the way.
Boys need them. Women need to find men like them, that they're not up for negotiation.
Men of principle.
Yeah, and still have a little blue collar in them that, you know, that are still one of the folks.
How do you go from playing Jesus Christ to the Count of Monte Cristo to Mr. Reese, and now in your latest film Escape Plan you play this kind of very sadistic, weird guy, Jim Caviezel. And are you aware of that your writers might be talking to somebody at the NSA?
Well, we just shot an episode last night, and to throw everybody off, the last scene that we shot it with two different actors, because we have people that are watching. So some people know what's going to happen, but they don't know to who. And that scene that we shot, I literally got the pages at that moment, and it was only 5 people that have those pages. Only 5. Wow. So if my pages get out, they're all marked.
The NSA stuff, did that freak you out at all? Learning how much control the government has and how much access to your privacy and to mine and everybody else's vis-a-vis this show, or you were always sort of aware?
I was very aware of the NSA and the Snowden stuff. The frustration is when I told people about it, it didn't count. And so if the public is informed through the proper channels, through CNN, through Fox, through what have you, MSNBC, then it's legitimate. But if I were to tell you that, it doesn't mean anything.
Register.
Well, we were talking about Miss Teen USA. I think a 19-year-old kid, not a 45-year-old, not somebody who was, you know, this is no 65-year-old Albert Einstein here. We're talking about a 19-year-old kid.
Yeah.
Got into a 17-year-old's computer and did it in such a way that she perceived it to be off.
Right.
And
the computer was open.
Took nude photos of her.
Using this camera there, yeah.
And then said, look, if you don't want these pictures to come out, pay me this money. FBI got involved. We do stuff like that all the time, where you think that phone's off and it's on. You know, those lights don't have to be on. That's just to allow you to know that they're on, but that doesn't mean that that phone is not on. If your computer has a light that's supposed to come on, and this is what this kid figured out, how to make it so that those lights don't come on.
Camera, but no light.
That's exactly right.
Has it made you more wary of the technology you carry with you?
I got rid of the internet. I don't need it anymore.
Wow.
You know.
So, do you communicate by pigeons now?
Oh, I
send the courier
they can
pigeons
listen.
out?
They can listen to me on my phone conversations. I'm much more, you know, astute to what I talk about over the phone now.
My heart was burning, and I miss it. I felt heaven in my heart, even as bad as in a situation as that was. Look, after the movie was over, I had to have open heart surgery.
Yeah.
And being struck by lightning was, you know, but I never felt abandoned. I felt like he was there with me. And I want people to know that, even in this suffering, that our Lord isn't going to abandon him. He's very, very real. But we need that, though, in order to be authentic. People often are afraid to die, but we're all going to die at some point. If I had a message to give, I would say, we need to love God. We need to every day say, I love you, Lord. He needs to hear it from us. In the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening, because so many of his children do not love him and have forgotten him. And that's not good enough. And if you ask me, would you do this? Yes. Absolutely, I'd do the resurrection again, just for that purpose, so the world will know who he is. I will have served my purpose. It doesn't matter if it costs me my life. I'm okay with that. I freely give it, as long as because in the next moment that I'm in heaven, we talk about that in the film. It'll hurt for a bit. It's gone. You're in heaven. I said, you know, I'm the wrong guy for the role of Jesus. And he goes, you know, Jim, his name's Yvonne. He said, God doesn't always choose the best. But he chose you. What are you going to do? So there's a purpose for all of us.
Living in the shadows, yeah.
You see it in my industry. Go to parties, you see people that just are empty. It's not appealing to me. And some people would rather go after the things and then get nothing here. This is having meaning in your life is everything. So being able to have Jesus come through me in the resurrection or the passion or whatever, the apostle of Christ, that heaven can use me and to bring people back. What more could you ask for?
For example, if I was in Hollywood and I had attained all, you know, homes and money and everything, and I had that lack of love in my heart, I would feel empty. And you see many people that have had all the things, and yet they commit suicide. Why? There's this emptiness there. And there was the hook in the film to me was where when I saw, I never met Christ in person, but when I saw you, I saw Christ in you. He became real. And then I think about that piece and then said, well, the world would look at this and say, oh, biblical movie, but this is relevant now.
What was amazing is that everybody wants resurrection, nobody wants suffering. But can you have the gold medal without suffering? Can you does a man, when he's sitting there and his country's flag is going up, and he's got a gold medal around his neck, and he's weeping as he going, I'm crying because Nike just called and is giving me a $30 million contract. That must be it.
Yeah.
Or is it that I see the sacrifice, I see my family suffering, I see them you're joined to a lot of other people that have given so much into your country and to people that have given their life for God and paying with their own blood. And you hear the Star-Spangled Banner. Much the same way, in this piece, I wanted this thing to transcend. If I'm going to do this movie, I don't want to do the passion of mediocrity or something that is a little pagan, that he wasn't handed over by his own, that only the Romans were so responsible. But if you look at it day after day, that we all are part of handing Christ over when we contribute to sin, especially when we betray him and we are Christians. But Jesus then continues to tell us to get back up, to try, to keep going. When you're hung on a cross, you die by asphyxiation, suffocation. But I mean, physically, I was struggling. But our Lord was letting me feel a little bit of what he went through.
Yeah.
And he was sustaining me, but to a point of, how far do you want to go with this? How much do you want the world to see of me? And I said, every bit of it. Well, then you're in for it. It's kind of like, Lord, I want to can you drink the cup that I'm going? Yes, we can. We can, James and John, asking that we want to sit at your right and left-hand side. So it was given. But, it's funny, I'm in San Diego. When I was a young man, I came out at 18 and I wanted to be a Navy SEAL. I didn't know what Navy SEALs were. They started talking about frogmen. At 18, I told my dad this is what I wanted to do, and I applied to the United States Naval Academy 3 times. I was going to give my life, but in a different way. God had reserved that in me. I see those guys when they go through buds, and I said, there's no way you can make it through unless you're willing to say, it's okay if I die here at buds. So I want to give my life for something. And there's nothing better for me than to give my life for Jesus Christ.
He is here to reach all, not just Christians, Muslims, Jews, atheists, everybody in the whole world. Jesus Christ died for all men. All men, that means every country, every nation. You can think of every color and every race. If people don't come and see it, then, forget about it. Films that get made are the ones that make money. And if this film goes off the charts, you're going to see a whole, plethora of films based in the Bible. You're going to see great films that have some sort of redeeming value. But again, if you want those kind of films, you have to support them. If you don't get behind them, they will not get made.
You don't have to go out and do a song and dance for seculars because they won't believe. They won't believe anyway. You can pray for them. That's the way it's going to be. But understand, people are going to choose evil, but you don't. And the devil is going to sift you out. He's going to look right now. Where are you weak? I can get this guy $1 million and he'll turn. 10 million for this guy, 50 over here. They'll all turn. They'll all say, well, choice, my freedom to choose. Every generation of Americans needs to know that freedom exists not to do what you like, but having the right to do what you ought.
Tremendous.
If you want to look at it this way, the problem I see right now is the fact that many Christians have immersed themselves in paganism. They want to be cool to their Christian or pagan friends by being a little pagan so they can be cool. There's nothing cool in this. The only thing lacking in you is that you don't want to be holy. Well, here's what will happen. We'll all come to task one day, and you either get a chance to lay it down for Jesus, or you'll get to deny him. But it will come in our generation this way. There are many things that you see on the horizon right now where you're going to have to make a choice. You will have to make a choice. Some of us now, you know them,
Embrace a fake Christianity, where it's all happy talk. I call it happy Jesus and glory. Guys, there was a lot of pain and suffering before the resurrection. Your path will be no different. So embrace your cross and race toward your goal. I want you to go out into this pagan world. I want you to have the courage to step into this pagan world and shamelessly express your faith in public.
We need Christians to go look death in the face and understand the next point, to encourage these people to understand that eternity awaits them. We're all going to die, the first death. Hopefully not the second. God never sends a man to hell. People choose this place.
Yeah.
Our democracy cannot be sustained without a shared commitment to certain moral truths about the human person and the human community. The basic question before a democratic society is this: how ought we to live together? And in seeking an answer to this question, can society exclude moral truth and moral reasoning? Set yourselves apart from this corrupt generation, my brothers and sisters. You weren't made to fit in. You were born to stand out.
That's right. Tremendous. Tremendous. So now you've started on a new endeavor. It's actually been a 6-year process. The audio Bible, Word of Promise. Tell us a little bit about that project and what it means to you and the purpose behind it.
This audio Bible is the passion of the Christ, but it is the passion of Christ in your car. It's the passion of the Christ when you're depressed and everyone's rejecting you because they only like winners. It's when you've hit that depressive state when you think of suicide, or you've had your abortions, or you paid for one. It's to understand that Jesus will forgive, and He has mercy, and the greatest of mercy. I don't think even we understand what mercy is, or what grace is. You can't be an Olympic athlete, you can't be a world champion by practicing once a week. You have to take Jesus Christ into your life every day. It's who you are. He's a part of you. He wants to be with you all the time. He's the greatest coach there ever was. But He's that coach that when you fall down, He's like, get up, man, go. Then does He push you? Absolutely. He wants much from you. He's the one that encourages you to fast, to not just pray once a week, but to pray every day. And then once you're praying every day, you change the workout because you can do more, can't you? Yes. And He wants more. He demands more, and you want it. And after you make it, you get there. There's more and more. And it's a continual thing, even in heaven, on earth as it is in heaven. Guys, our Father is real.
Yeah.
The gospel is real. It's not something that you just put away. You read this, it's now. The gospel, some of you are going to play the Virgin Mary. Some of you play Jesus. Some of you will play His betrayer, Judas. And some of you will be Pilate, the politician. Who are you? God will tell you. And then you move in the direction of holiness every day. You're in the car, you're depressed. Right now we're going through a time period where things are being stripped from us. And they will. And it's good. Because you understand, you don't need all the things that we've been given. They aren't your given right. They're going to be stripped. We're living in this time right now where the world is going to be fasting, and it's going to get hard before it gets better. But God, the people need to see God in you. They need to be a light, because you need to be that light. Because they're going to see you, and they're going to think suicide is the way out. But they see you. They want that. Will you ask me this? But I will tell you what I know God wants me to say.
Sure.
Number one, I love you. I love you. That's what you want to hear, isn't it? Number two, you are all going to heaven. And you say, how do you know this? It's very simple. God had been in your heart a long time. He's been dormant, some of you. Some of you, much more alive. But continually, God is asking for more conversion. Why do you believe? Let me tell you, a man can be a soldier in the military for 20 years and never see one day of combat. But when he's in that foxhole and he's losing his own men, he's on a whole nother level. God is preparing you now for this level. I will tell you how I know that God loves you this much and how I know that you're all going to heaven. Some of you have had abortions. Some men here and women are adulterers. Some have committed murder. Some of you didn't have the abortion, but you paid for it, so you have contributed to this. Many people are part of this great sin in this country. Over 50 million in the United States alone. 45 million die every year in the world. These are all God's children, and God brings them home. Now He wants to bring you home. Now, in this moment. This is a chance for heaven right now. You don't have to wait to die to experience heaven. But when you committed the sin, any of the 10 Commandments, or the sin of abortion, or contributed to it, let me be very clear. Did you go to one of your friends and ask your friend, hear my story? And you say, yes. I went to one person. I said, why do you go to this person to confide in this sin to them? Because they didn't judge me. Because they loved me. Because I felt mercy and grace. Now, I ask you this. Do you think that your God doesn't have more mercy than your friend? Do you think your friend has more grace than God? Does your friend have more love than the Creator? It can never be. It can never be. So, God forgives you. And now He needs you to begin again. To accept forgiveness. Earlier I said, God never sends a man into hell. People choose this place. Your choice. God made you and loves you. There's never been another like you. He deemed that you would come here. He asked you and you came. Today, you came. You had the courage to come. And there was plenty parts of the world that pulled you from today from even coming, but you came. Don't you know how much God will remember this? Do you think He is a God that's just sitting there waiting to toss you off? You are perfect. There is no one else like you. And without you, He would cry. So He's coming to you now. Right now, in this moment. All He has to hear from you is yes. Yes, you've accepted Jesus, some of you. Keep accepting Him. Every time we sin, we deny Him. Be holy. Be perfect just as my Father is perfect. Or in the Passion, Ha'ozina otiabui, kuma bezrati, shamereni meresha tasher tamenu alai, v'chakasaya nafshi Adonai, v'chakisiti, v'kab takti, ba kulitekehu henkehel kosi edemini, v'ken lakis far, lehewe di lakis far, milatil komara hema hakihida, Hita hivo denale dena kokaver diana ahevef lakom antun. Hita hivo lakom. My commandment to you is this: you love one another, just as I have loved you. And if that doesn't grab you, maybe this one will. Your name may not appear down here in this World's Hall of Fame. In fact, you may be so unknown that no one knows your name. The Oscars and the praise of men may never come your way, but don't forget, God has rewards that He'll hand out someday. This crowd on earth, they will soon forget when you're not at the top. They will cheer like mad until you fall, and then their praise will stop. Not God, He never does forget. And in His Hall of Fame, by just believing on His Son, forever there's your name. I tell you, friend, I wouldn't trade my name, however small, that's written there beyond the stars in that celestial hall,
for all the famous names on earth, or the glory that they share. I'd rather be an unknown here and have my name up there. God bless you.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
I love you.
It did dig pretty deep on me. Not just the making of it and the post-production aspect of it, but what it did culturally was astounding to me.
I'm a different person now than I was a couple years ago from this film, from working on this movie. My family has completely changed. My friends that have worked on this film are different to different degrees. Everybody was touched. I was drastically touched.
It was about forgiving your enemies, and they understood that. And that kind of message, and that it could convey that to most people that saw it, is for me a raging success, and defeats division, separation, and brought many, many people together. And that was the idea. So it worked.
What if what happened in Fatima 101 years ago was much more complex than any of us could have imagined? What if there was a fourth witness hidden away for decades, and through the detective work of researcher Fina Di Armata, this witness was discovered and interviewed? In that interview, the fourth witness described seeing a being with blonde hair floating in midair above the same tree that the apparition would later appear over. What if the so-called angel hair that fell over the crowd is also reported by witnesses who have had close encounters with UFOs today? Then there is the dull silver disc, which flew over the 80,000 people gathered at Fatima, which seemed to create chaos as car windshields exploded, hoods flew open, and gasoline spontaneously combusted. What if there was a picture taken 101 years ago that lay undiscovered in the Fatima archives until one man, Jose Machado, had access to it? What he found may be a smoking gun. Then there are the numerous reports of apparitions and so-called sun miracles. But what are these really? Could they be harbingers of deception? This is Fatima 2, Strange Phenomenon.
we are absolutely seeing the end of the age, and most Christians, Jim, they will not accept that, okay? They will not accept that the very Bible that they preach from. Oh, yes, I tell you, the book of Revelation says this, and guess what? You ask them, what chapter, what verse? And look, I'm sorry to make fun, but it's not that. It's the Word has to be in their heart. They have to be proven by the Word, and they have to basically understand that God is a holy God. And I ask you this, where is the church's indignation over all of the 31 flavors now of human relationships, okay? I mean, seriously, where is the indignation? And the thing of 70 million children. You can look at history. We write about history. We track the most agorific, that's gorish and horrific stuff. And guess what? Nobody learns from history. There's a denial of history. They who control the past determine the future. Timothy Alberino is the director and the writer of the True Legends series. And God brought him into my life in order to basically pass on what I know. You know, at 65, and that's questionable only by, chronological age, because I had arrested development. I love that word. I mean, I was really arrested, and people would say to me, you need to grow up. And I'd say, why? But the point being is that Tim has gone to Rome and Sardinia and Malta in search of this. And people say, well, you guys, you're making a big deal out of it. No, you don't understand, ladies and gentlemen, the greatest deception in history. Tom Horn, you've heard him. Those of you who have heard Tom Horn, this is the greatest deception in history. So I'd like to turn it over to Tim and just let him tell you, Tim, give him the bottom line on True Legends, the unholy sea.
Timothy, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Great to have you here.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you. As Steve said, the bottom line, which is what he just expressed, the greatest deception the world has ever seen is about to break forth on the earth. And that is a fact. And all the pieces and parts are coming together for it now. We have been developing a series called True Legends. And for those who are unfamiliar, it's a documentary film series. We have a first episode, Technology of the Fallen, that we have already produced. It's been out for a year. And then our second episode, which is called The Unholy Sea, was just released a couple of days ago.
Incredible. Very eye-opening.
And it's really interesting because the first episode that we did, we spent most of our time in Peru. In fact, we spent all of our time in Peru. And we were documenting the megaliths, and we were documenting some of the pre-flood constructions. Now, let me explain something for those who don't understand. The term megalith simply refers to ancient constructions that were devised, that were built with extremely large stones. And we're talking hundreds of tons. We're talking about edifices that could not be constructed today using cranes, industrial cranes. So we're dealing with a level of technology and engineering capability in the prehistoric past that in many cases we cannot reproduce today.
So let me make that clear. What you just said was that they were moving stones thousands of years ago, and we can't even move these stones today with our modern technology.
In some cases, yes.
Wow.
And not only are they moving these stones, these constructions are referred to as Cyclopean construction, Cyclopean architecture. Cyclopean architecture refers to these megalithic constructions that are built without the use of mortar. So not only are they moving these large stones and configuring them and constructing them, they're configuring them without mortar. And when you watch our documentary series, you'll see some of the locations that we visit, such as in Puno, Peru. We go to, in the first episode, we go to Bolivia. We visit a place called Tiwanaku, and we show you some of these constructions, and we tell you something about them that you're not going to hear on the Discovery Channel, on the History Channel. We tell you that these constructions are pre-flood constructions, that these edifices were built by a hybrid race in the world before the flood of Noah. And some of you have probably seen the Ancient Alien series that's on, I don't know if it's on the History Channel, Discovery Channel, but there's many programs coming out now dealing with this topic. But what they're not doing is they're not telling you the whole truth. They're just telling you part of the truth. Because the whole truth is contained within the pages of Scripture. Wow. And so we're dealing with pre-flood constructions in episode 1, and we continue to deal with it in episode 2, the unholy sea. But what's interesting about episode 2 is we didn't know, Steve and I didn't know exactly what the content of our second episode was going to center around. And we somehow found ourselves in Rome at the Vatican, because we realized that very literally, when dealing with the antediluvian constructions and the antediluvian races and what I call the empire of the gods that existed in the world before the flood of Noah, there's a vast cover-up. And this cover-up extends, and Steve writes extensively about this in his book, True Legends, which our film is based on. This book here by Steve Quayle, True Legends. And we talk about, and Steve talks about in his book, the cover-up by the Smithsonian institution, hiding the bones of giants in the United States.
That's right.
Because the bones of giants can be found and are indeed found.
That's right.
All over the earth.
Well, I not only believe it, but I interviewed on True Legends, the second one, The Unholy Sea. We have the interview of the pilot that flew a dead giant out of Afghanistan. How many of you are familiar with that story? And that was in 2005. Okay, let me tell you the story. During our war in Afghanistan, special operations teams went in looking for the Taliban, looking for all the terrorists. Well, a special operations team got killed by a giant in the mountain caves, because that's where they were all hanging out. First brought it public, took the pilot. Now, I'm talking about a living giant, 12 feet tall, that completely wiped out a group of, our best Marines.
1,000 pounds.
Brian Snowdy did that. One of the best sketch artists in the world.
And I was mentioning how there's certain entities out there, institutions that have been confiscating and concealing the existence of not only giants, a host of other things, and also
Who does it? Tell me.
Well, and not only confiscating and concealing, but also controlling the narrative concerning the megaliths and concerning the world, the ancient world, what we refer to as the prehistoric world.
Why do you think they want to cover
well,
this
let me tell you who it is first, and then we'll tell you why they're doing it.
He's going to give you the bottom line. I love it. Go ahead, give him the bottom line.
We've discovered this, okay? In a phrase, all roads lead to Rome. Everywhere we go around the world, all roads lead to Rome. We're finding that the main power behind the cover-up, at least the institution that knows for sure a lot of this information, they have it, they know the truth, but they have kept it concealed for sure, is the Vatican. And there's a reason why they're doing it. And this is a conspiracy. It's a vast conspiracy, and it has to do with the deception that we talked about. Steve said something that Steve's famous for saying, and that is sort of the byline of our film, is those who control the past determine the future. And what we mean by that is, if you can conceal the truth of the past, if you can keep people in the dark concerning what was, then you can deceive people concerning what is yet to be.
That is so true.
Because the procession of history is going full circle back to the beginning.
So true.
And the Vatican is leading
As
the
it
parade.
was in the days of Noah.
As it was in the days of Noah.
That's what Jesus says.
You can't really understand the prophetic future unless you understand the prehistoric past. The Bible lays this out for us in the 6th chapter of Genesis. That's why our production company is called Gen 6 Productions.
Oh, okay,
And that's why the logo for our production for our production company is a padlock in the form of a 6, because once you unlock the secret of what's going on in the days of Noah, everything else starts to fall into place, especially as it pertains to the last days. This isn't a Catholic thing. This is the institution of Rome, the Holy See. The institution of Rome is called the Holy See. That's the governing body. That is the official name for the Vatican, if you will.
Here's what people have got to understand.
Mother Angelica was my guest all the time.
Well, the bottom line is, seriously, the war is even taking place between traditional Catholics and the Nouveau Catholics and the Pope. And when I said that 25 years ago, I had to duck incoming, okay? Because no one would believe it. And now the war. And so when these guys, let me just set this up for you. When these guys, the film crew, goes to Rome, God set up some unique meetings, and one of them with a billionaire who basically share if you would from that, because it's really critical.
Hidden away in the vaults of the in the vaults and the archives are two separate things beneath the Vatican. The archives is what everybody knows about. There's documents under there, hidden documents that nobody has ever seen except those who have permission by the Holy See. But there's also vaults under the Vatican where artifacts are hidden. And we discovered proof, and we show in our film, that in fact, this isn't just some sort of a conspiracy, it is the truth. That the Vatican has had access to hidden artifacts, especially artifacts relating to the reality of the world before the flood of Noah, that they have confiscated and hidden away or covered up. Now,
Tim,
here's the question.
Can I say why?
Yeah.
That's the question.
Yeah.
Why?
Right.
Why?
Why?
Those who control the past determine the future. If you can control the narrative of the past, then you can control the narrative that is coming in the future, i.e. the deception.
Wow.
So the deception that's coming is going to be so powerful. The Bible calls it a great delusion or great deception. And it's the great deception. And again, it is the greatest deception that the world has ever seen. And it's going to be directly related with the ancient world.
What in the world do you think the Catholic Church is looking for up on Mount Graham?
Well, it's not just the Catholic Church, it's also the University of Arizona. It's a consortium of groups up there, but led by the Vatican. And of course, they speak very tongue-in-cheek about aliens and Planet X and these sort of things, although they don't call it Planet X. And supposedly they're looking for exo-worlds, they're looking for exoplanets where the existence of alien life is feasible. So planets that have water and the appropriate chemical composition in their atmosphere. This is what they're looking for. This is what they say they're looking for. But as Steve will tell you, when you talk to people who are in the black world, in other words, in the black operations, and they will tell you that these things are referred to as the gods of the Sumerians. The gods of the Sumerians are returning, is the idea. And when we talk about, we mentioned Zecharia Sitchin and the ancient astronaut theory. Well, part of the lie that I believe that is coming has to do with this idea that in the past, human beings were not alone on this planet. The gods of the so-called gods of the Sumerians, the Anunnaki, were here with us. Now, I don't know if they're going to literally say it was the Anunnaki, but they're definitely at some point going to reveal to the world that the human race is not alone. We're not alone in the universe, and we were not alone on the earth, and that they are, in fact, and have been for many years, in contact with non-human entities. And I believe this announcement is going to come from the Vatican. I believe that the Vatican is, in other words, from the Pope. I believe that the Vatican is going to lead the way on this. Now, for those of us who believe in the Scriptures, this should not come as a surprise to us, that we are not alone in the universe, because we are the human race made in the image of God. But there are other entities also that have inhabited the earth and that move in the different realms in the heavens and on the earth with us. Non-human entities. Obviously, we know about angels, and you guys are familiar with the narrative of Genesis 6. The fallen angels, which some apocryphal works describe as the watchers, in fact, the Bible in the book of Daniel also calls them watchers, descended to the earth. This was a rebellion. This was an act of insubordination against God.
Exactly.
They descended to the earth, and they took wives from the children, from the daughters of men, and they bred hybrids,
right.
And these hybrids were giants. But not only did they do this, other apocryphal works also, and not only apocryphal works, not only is it in the Bible, not only is it in the apocryphal works, but in every major culture around the earth, every major civilization around the earth tells the same story.
Amen.
In different terms. So the names change, the descriptions change, but it is the same story of the gods descending to the earth, breeding with the daughters of men, and creating the hybrid demigods of old. And of course, to the Greeks, the Titans and so forth. But not only did they copulate with human women, they also copulated with animals, the angels, these rebellious reprobate entities also copulated with animals and created a host, a mess, a genetic mess on the earth.
God wiped out everything at Noah's time in the flood for a reason. It was awful.
It was a genetic mess.
And he wiped it out, and man doesn't want to agree to that. But the Bible says it, and if you study this thing, Now, the Planet X, what is the real name of that? Do you know what the real name of Planet X is?
Well, it goes by a bunch of names. It goes by 9th planet, 10th planet, Nibiru. They call it Gabriel's fist. They call it Lucifer's hammer. There are all these names. But what's interesting, the ancients had such amazing understanding of the heavens, taught to them by their fallen angel progenitors. And the deal is that every so many thousand years, this planet comes into our solar system. It comes into the Earth's orbit and basically disrupts everything on Earth. That's why there are planets in our solar system that go in retrograde motion. That means opposite of the spin of the other ones. Why this is critical at this time, Jim? Didn't Jesus tell us there'd be signs in the sun, moon, and stars?
Yes.
Yeah, and see, so people say, well, you guys are getting into all this stuff that doesn't matter. Remember, the Bible says that God's people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. This should answer your question. It's not that God doesn't tell people what's going on, it's that they reject it. So the reason this is important is, and let me spell it out even, the narrative that's going to be promoted, and Tom Horn writes about this extensively, is the Vatican's getting ready to baptize aliens. Well, I can tell you, they're not creating the image and likeness of God. The best way to understand this is every boundary and every barrier that God put into effect for our safety because he loves us, that he put in to protect us, evil men in conjunction with fallen angels, okay, are now breaking those barriers down. That's what Jesus meant when he said the gates of hell would not prevail against the church. If you understand this, that the narrative is simply this: God and Jesus aren't real. The Anunnaki, the Space Brothers, the aliens created us. Science fiction, from the days of its black and white inception, have been building and building and building towards us, okay? The whole reason, Jim, they hide all of the artifacts and the truth is because if they acknowledge fallen angels, they acknowledge the book of Genesis. If they acknowledge the book of Genesis, they acknowledge the God of Genesis. God sets up meetings with some strange individuals. If you understand this, that the narrative is simply this: God and Jesus aren't real. The Anunnaki, the Space Brothers, the aliens created us. Science fiction, from the days of its black and white inception, have been building and building and building towards us, okay? The whole reason, Jim, they hide all of the artifacts and the truth is because if they acknowledge fallen angels, they acknowledge the book of Genesis. If they acknowledge the book of Genesis, they acknowledge the God of Genesis.
Right, we referenced before that we have proof that at least in one case the Vatican had special knowledge concerning some of the ancient artifacts and megalithic constructions that nobody else knew about. And one of the specific case that we deal with to prove this fact is in Cusco, Peru, where we talked to a very famous researcher and explorer, Spanish researcher and explorer named Anselm P. Rambla, who went to Peru, to Cusco, Peru, and was shown by the prior, by the priest of the, it's called the Convent of Santo Domingo. It's a very famous place in Cusco, Peru, where there's a church built, and this used to be what's called the Coricancha. The Inca ruled, the Incan Empire was based in Cusco, and when the Incan Empire existed before the Spanish destroyed it, their capital was Cusco, and their most holy site was what's known as the Coricancha. Well, after the Spanish deposed the Inca, the Dominicans took over the Coricancha, and they constructed a church on top of it. And if you're not aware, it is the MO of the Holy See to put their churches, to build their churches and religious structures, different religious structures, on top, in many cases, of very, very interesting ancient archaeological sites. And there's a number of reasons why they do this.
Yeah.
A very practical reason is just a show of dominance. The Church of Rome has conquered this pagan religion. But there's another reason, because in many cases, there are bones and there are artifacts hidden underneath these structures. And it is the confiscation of these bones and the control of the information that they portend that is the prerogative of Rome. And so, in Cusco, the Church of the Dominicans was built up on top of the most holy site of the Inca called the Coricancha. And Anselm P. Rambla, again, was taken by one of the head priests, the head priest of the convent at the time. This was in 1982. And he was brought into there was a trap door on the floor of the church that was covered over with an altar. They moved the altar out of the way because he asked this priest about a legend. And this legend is known as the Xincana in Quechuan. And that's the native language that the Inca spoke. And the Xincana is a famous legend in South America. And what it is it is a vast underground, a network of underground tunnels, ancient underground tunnels, and caverns and passageways. But we're talking about vast, immense tunnels that run for hundreds and hundreds of miles. Keep in mind, this is prehistoric. And these are manufactured tunnels in many cases that connect to natural caverns. And they're not only are they tunnels, they're also lined in some cases with megalithic walls underground. So anybody who has any kind of an engineering background immediately recognizes the problems that ancient people would run into trying to construct this vast underground network called the Xincana. And so that's why it's been considered to be a legend, because it simply couldn't be true that there's this underground network running for hundreds and hundreds and thousands of miles in some cases. That's an ancient network that was built by some ancient people. So it's just a legend. Historians have written it off as a legend. It's not a legend. It exists. And Anselm P. Rambla proved that it existed, and he found the entrance to a part of this tunnel hidden, concealed beneath the convent of Santo Domingo, the church of the Dominicans in Cusco.
Amazing.
And he saw it with his own eyes.
And there's doorways and arches and gates and things.
In this case, this tunnel led from the Coricancha, where the convent was built on top of, all the way. This one was just a mile-long corridor going to the Sacsayhuaman, which is a megalithic fortress, one of the most impressive megalithic fortresses on the face of the earth. It's called Sacsayhuaman, and it is located about a mile outside of Cusco, Peru. And this tunnel ran from underneath the church all the way to underneath the Sacsayhuaman. And the significance of this is that for all these years, the reality of this tunnel, not just this particular tunnel, but this tunnel system, the Xincana, the vast ancient underground tunnel system, has been written off as a myth, as a legend. And yet the Vatican has known of its existence, that it is in fact
Okay, so
true.
I have a very, as Jim would maybe use this term, stupid question, but so how does this pertain to us right now, today? How does this affect us?
Well, in our film, we take a lot of time to, first of all, prove to people, being at these sites personally, these megalithic sites, prove to people that first of all, this is real. This isn't fantasy. Somebody was building in the antediluvian world, the world before the flood, on a scale and with technology that we can't even reproduce today.
And they're coming back. That's the thing. They're coming back.
Because history repeats.
Yes, and because God, the days of Noah.
So in the Bible.
The days of Noah. And so I don't mean to interrupt you, but I understand your question. When people ask me all the time, why is this relevant? Because the very technology, the very evil nature. If you know anything about the Incan, Mayans, and Aztecs, they weren't vegans or vegans, okay?
No.
They ate people. And for such a long time, they've tried to cover that up. But see, this is what's critical. So when you understand, and I use a little bit of, well, I attempt to humor at least, because it is such a heavy subject. It is heavy. I only know this, that when God sent the children of Israel into the promised land, he told them to kill every man, woman, and child. Do you know that probably 80% of Christians don't think that's fair? Really, you know? And people would always ask me that. And then the answer came. Because they were hybrids. They weren't human beings. They were half and half. We live in a comic book world now where the truth has to be hidden at all costs.
It's not in the by and by. They are mixing humans and animals.
They did it in 1947 in the Antarctic, okay? The Inhuman...
Is that in this book?
Yeah, it's in the...
this is in the big
Empire Beneath You.
today.
All of the genetic manipulation. What people don't understand, when Solomon said there's nothing new under the sun, for that which will be has already been, or that which has been will already be, you know, but you can do it either way. But the point being is that the entire Third Reich will lead to the Fourth Reich, and everything was built around occult and psychic experience, demons, fallen angels, and so what's important, hey, Jim, what Tim did, and I'm just filling the blanks real quick, and then you can share. I mean, the most provocative writer-author of the whole aliens created us movement, the Anunnaki, that's a Sumerian name for the false gods. Tell him about the gentleman that you interviewed, the billionaire guy, and what he basically said about who showed up at Zechariah Sitchin. Understand this. We're on the biblical side. He's on the other side. The aliens are coming back.
In our film, again, this is the ancient astronaut theory. Zechariah Sitchin is considered to be one of the fathers of ancient astronaut theory, which basically contends that the human race was genetically altered. Actually, a hominid species on Earth was genetically altered to create the human race. And so the gods created us is basically the narrative. The aliens created us, and they're coming back. That's in a nutshell the ancient alien narrative. And there's many Christians who are being frankly beguiled by that narrative precisely because of the megaliths and stuff like that, and these guys go and they use the same kind of stuff that we're talking about to prove the flood of Noah and all this kind of stuff. They're using it to prove the ancient astronaut theory. But what Steve's saying is that what most people don't realize is that Zechariah Sitchin was not only was he crafting this, he was translating the ancient documents of the Sumerians and coming up with this narrative, but he was also in contact with entities that he called the Anunnaki. And that's something that most people don't realize, something that's in our film and that we reveal. And so it kind of puts a whole new spin for the people who are into the ancient alien theory. They don't realize that this guy was actually being contacted by entities, which of course we would consider to be demonic entities.
Now you met with the Vatican researcher Leo Zagoni, is that
Leo Zagami?
Zagani. And Leo told you that the Vatican is awaiting something, awaiting a alien savior. I think I read that. Did I not? How is it possible that people who serve Jesus Christ could be looking for an alien savior? Now, you really heard him say that.
Well, that's the crux of the issue, really, when you deal with the Holy See, is that, and this is something that we break down in our film, is that the institution of Rome, the Roman institution, the Holy See, the Holy Roman Catholic Church, is not the church. It's an institution that really has its roots in ancient Babylon. Listen, the traditional Protestant view of the Pope, the traditional Protestant view for many years, is that the Pope is an antichrist in the earth.
That's
in fact,
exactly
the title
right.
Vicar
Do you
of
believe
Christ,
what's the role of the Pope then? And all we've been talking a lot.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting to. So the title that the Pope carries, Vicar of Christ, literally means in place of Christ. He is an antichrist in the earth. This isn't my opinion. This is the traditional Protestant view of the Pope of Rome.
That's right.
I mean, every Protestant denomination in its beginning held this view of the Pope of Rome. And even the believers who were not a part of the Catholic Church, who rejected the Pope of Rome from the beginning, considered him to be an antichrist in the earth.
But are you saying he's the Antichrist? Are you saying Antichrist spirit?
Not the final Antichrist. Again, traditionally, he was considered an Antichrist. Remember, Paul said there are many Antichrists?
Yes.
And so he is considered an Antichrist in the earth.
This gentleman, I'll call him that, has done everything he can to denigrate Jesus Christ, to say all roads lead to heaven, to basically not defend the Christians that are being persecuted, to embrace Islam, to basically make statements, embracing all the anti-biblical standards that traditional Catholics stand for, okay? That's the point. That's where the war, you mark my words, the war is coming in the Catholic Church. I'm talking physical war. I'm not talking, spiritual arguing. There's going to be a war, because here's the deal. The enemy, the hater of mankind, the hater of Jesus Christ. You know why we're where we're at? Real simple. You keep asking. I got the question, because I asked that question so many times, the Lord finally answered me. Is because we failed to uplift Jesus Christ, because we failed to be the salt of the earth, because we failed to be the light, because we feared man more than God, because we didn't stand up for the unborn, because we didn't stand up for the prayer in school, because we wouldn't stand up. And now guess what? It comes to the point, there's no one standing up for us except Jesus. The one who we abandon will be the one who saves us.
Wow.
And I'm telling you, point blank, that's why, you can get 50 different guys on prophecy, but here's the thing. At the end of the day, it's about Jesus.
Yes.
Without him, and John 15, without Jesus, we can do nothing.
That's right.
And my answer to that is, I say, Lord, without you, I don't want to do anything. So when the Pope has made the statement, and his top theologians, astronomers, this is what Tom does so marvelously, is laying out their statements about aliens. They're expecting the return of the space brethren. The Pentagon is calling them the gods of the Sumerians are returning. The Word of God says the gates of hell are opening and won't prevail. The bottom line is it is the end times, the end of the age. And again, the Lord himself is the one who can deliver us. God saves his people. And when God arises, only then will his enemies, our enemies, be scattered.
Yeah.
He's waiting for the people of God to believe him, that number one, he is who he says he is. Number two, he's done what he said he'd do. And number three, he's going to pour out his Spirit without measure.
Like I started off saying in the beginning, the greatest deception in history is about to unfold. And we believe that at least the religious side of it is being led by Rome.
Anything that has the name of Christ attached to it, gone, Any evidence that, Jim, I don't believe it was, in your case, what you were doing in the Holy Land. I don't believe anything is by circumstance, because again, whatever you would prove that validates the word of the Lord has to be stopped at all means, okay? By all means. And what's happened is it's not only normalcy bias, but because good people who are trying to walk right before the Lord don't understand the nature of evil, they cannot identify the evil when it's right before them.
We have a trailer all about the new movie, the True Legends documentary, that we have prepared if you want to roll that.
Yeah, roll it right now.
Okay, here's the new documentary
Do you have
trailer.
that in the control room?
Of
Yeah, go ahead
True
and roll
Legends.
that then.
They say this thing had been dead for maybe a day or two. We estimated his size at approximately 12 to 10 feet tall. The giant killed the first team that they came across. He was extremely big and fast and agile for a guy that size.
The popes and the agents of the Holy See have known about the giants for many centuries.
And do you believe that they have artifacts from the past that would help explain some of what's going on?
Absolutely sure.
The Vatican knows all the secrets. Secretly preparing for the arrival of alien saviors.
They seem to be intentionally creating dogma
that is going to position the Roman Catholic Church to be at the forefront of an official disclosure moment.
The Vatican is involved in ufology in ways that they can't even imagine.
So while we're standing here in the headquarters of the Jesuits, tell us about Mount Graham.
They are constantly monitoring things with the Lucifer device. Sometimes they have to wait for all of the UFOs to get out of the way.
I would like to tell you more about Zechariah's teaching. He told me, John Mario, one night I wake up and I saw an Anunnaki sitting on my bed.
History is being repeated. The days of Noah are returning.
The gods are returning to the earth to dwell among men and mingle their seed with the human race.
Only the truth can prepare us for the lie that's coming.
We get asked all the time, why does any of this matter? Why should we care about any of this? Well, I would ask the same question about any subject that we take any time whatsoever
Yes.
in our lives to spend time on.
Yes.
And Gary made a great point yesterday that we ought to be more hungry as believers, more hungry for the truth than any other faction of people on the face of the earth.
Absolutely.
And we ought to have more truth about everything.
Yes.
Because, I mean, Jesus isn't just the author of Scripture, he's the creator of the universe. Amen. And so everything that is comes from him. And so, I always ask people, well, if your son or daughter was going to high school and they decided not to teach history, would that upset you? If they decided not to teach math, would you be upset about that? Or would you have the attitude, well, why does it matter anyway? You wouldn't. Because it matters.
It matters.
We know fundamentally that history matters, don't we?
Yes.
So how much more fundamental is it for us to have the true history of this world that we live in, of the earth, especially as it pertains to the gospel? Much more. And so that's on a very practical level. That's why it matters. Among the other reasons why it matters, you can, even if you just boil it down to that, we want to know the truth.
Yes.
And this is, and again, I'll make the final statement that if you want to understand what's coming in the future in a prophetic sense, you have to understand what was happening in the world before the flood of Noah.
Yes.
It's not an option. You must understand what was happening in the world before the flood of Noah.
Excellent.